New York City, January 1942. 6 weeks earlier, Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, and now the whole city practices blackout drills after dark. Lights off, curtains shut, in case the bombers come there next. Edward Hopper's studio, at 1 Washington Square, keeps his lights on anyway. His wife Jo writes in her diary that he refuses to take any interest in the very real possibility of being bombed. In that mood, Hopper finishes the painting that would become the most recognized image of loneliness in American art. 4 people sit in an all-night diner, lit up like an aquarium in the dark. A couple at the counter, a man with his back to us, a counterman leaning in. None of them speak. It reads like a snapshot of strangers. It isn't. 2 of those 4 people are the same man, painted twice. The third is his wife. There is no 4th stranger in this painting. There's just Edward Hopper, looking at himself, next to the only woman he'd ever let model for him. Hopper said the painting was suggested by a restaurant on Greenwich Avenue, in his own Greenwich Village neighborhood, where 2 streets meet. He also said he simplified the scene and made the restaurant bigger than it really was. The actual building is long gone, and researchers still argue over which corner it stood on, which means the most famous diner in American art was never really a diner at all. It was Hopper's memory of one, rebuilt from scratch on canvas. He finished it on January 21st, 1942, and his wife Jo, a painter herself, and the person who titled nearly all of his work, logged it in their household ledger that day. Within months, the Art Institute of Chicago bought it for $3,000, a little over $50,000 today. Hopper called it one of the best things he ever painted, and said he'd come nearer to saying what he wanted to say than in anything before it. The wartime context matters. Even if Hopper himself waved it off later, saying he didn't think he painted it as especially lonely, the country was 6 weeks into a war that had just turned personal. Cities were dimming their own lights on purpose, and here was a painting entirely about light refusing to go out. One lit room in an otherwise blacked out city, with 3 customers who don't look at each other, and a counterman who does his job anyway. Jo's own diary from that period captures the mood around him. He wrote that Hopper refused to take any interest in the very likely prospect of being bombed, working through the anxiety instead of hiding from it. Whether or not he meant it, the painting is soaked up in the specific dread of that January. There's an odd footnote worth knowing if you covered his contemporaries. Hopper's biographer, Gail Levin, has argued he may have drawn on Van Gogh's Café Terrence at Night, which happened to be on exhibit in New York that same January. Both paintings share the same basic idea, a glowing, popular interior carved out of an empty, dark street. Though Hopper's version strips out every trace of warmth Van Gogh's Café still has. Where Van Gogh's Terrence invites you in, Hopper's diner has no door at all. Most readings of this painting stop at urban loneliness, and that's not wrong, but it skips the strangest fact about it. Hopper posed for both seated men himself, working from his own reflection in a mirror. His wife Jo posed for the red-haired woman, as she did for every female figure he ever painted. She insisted on it, made it a condition of the marriage. By all accounts, theirs was a combative relationship, and Jo guarding her position as his only model was one of the ways she held on to him. So the loneliest room in American art isn't strangers failing to connect. It's a husband, painted twice, sitting near a version of his wife, and neither version is speaking to her. Look at the actual geometry of the scene knowing that, and it reads differently. There's no door at this diner, no visible way in or out, just glass. Whether that was a symbolic choice or a compositional one, it seals the figures inside their own light. The counterman is the one person in the painting who isn't trapped by it. He has a job, a home, somewhere to go when the shift ends. The customers, Hopper, twice over, and his wife are the ones going nowhere. That reframes the whole picture. It's not a comment on the city, it's a comment on a marriage, filtered through a diner that didn't exist, using a mirror and a wife who'd agreed to be the only woman he ever painted. Even Hopper's own language around the piece hints at this. According to Jo's diary, he referred to it as a painting of 3 characters, not 4. The counterman doesn't fully count in his own accounting, because the counterman is the one figure who isn't a version of Hopper or Jo. The one person who actually gets to leave when the lights go off. The other 3 are the ones stuck being looked at. The painting was recognized immediately as something exceptional. The Art Institute of Chicago didn't wait, buying it the same year it was finished, while Hopper was still a respected but not yet legendary American painter. Over the following decades, Nighthawks became something bigger than a well-regarded painting. It became shorthand. It's one of the most reproduced and most parodied images in the history of American art. It's 4 figures swapped out for cartoon characters, film stars, superheroes, dogs playing poker, over and over in a way almost no other 20th century painting has been. The Simpsons has referenced it. Tom Waits named an album after it. It shows up in poetry, in crime shows, and album covers, endlessly recirculated as an instant visual shorthand for late-night isolation. That's a strange fate for a painting this personal. The version of the story that gets repeated, lonely strangers, wartime dread, existential American isolation, is the version that photocopies well. It's simple, it's moody, and it doesn't require knowing anything about Edward and Joe Hopper's marriage. The biographical version is stranger and harder to turn into a meme, which is probably exactly why it gets left out of most retellings. Even the Art Institute of Chicago, which owns the piece, has pushed back on the loneliness reading in its own later writing, suggesting the painting might just as easily be read as hopeful. 4 figures gathered in one lit room instead of scattered alone across a dark city, a small active company in the middle of a frightened year. Both readings can be true on the same canvas. That's usually the sign a painting has actually said something, rather than just illustrated a mood. Nighthawks has stayed at the Art Institute of Chicago since 1942. The same year it's sold. It's never going up for resale, and the museum treats it as effectively priceless. It's one of their most requested paintings for reproduction, licensing, and loans, one of the true anchor pieces of the entire collection. The diner itself never got that kind of permanence. The building Hopper based it on, wherever exactly it stood, was demolished long ago, and no one has ever conclusively identified the site. So the most iconic all-night diner in American culture doesn't exist, and never quite did. It was a real corner on Hopper's neighborhood, enlarged and rebuilt in his head, populated with his own reflection and his wife, then sold within a year to a museum 800 miles from the city block it was supposedly copied from. Everything about Nighthawks that feels like a candid photograph of strangers turns out, the closer you look, to be constructed. An invented diner, a cast of 2 people instead of 4, a couple that's really a marriage. The painting became the definitive image of American loneliness by staging exactly the opposite of a candid moment. Nothing in it was found. All of it was built, down to the 2 men at the counter, who were never 2 men at all.